Hello adventurers, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're actually visiting a place that we've been before. We are back at Garden of the Gods here in Colorado Springs to do a full tour of all the things that are inside the museum and then across the street at the actual garden. It is spectacular here and I'm taking you along for the ride. Whenever you come into the visitor center, there is a first room that is filled with all sorts of interesting displays. And as we kind of go through these, we can actually utilize the touch screens to find out a little bit more about the parks. Now, these are pretty neat because it gives you options to do all sorts of different things. And this one right here, for example, 3 different options. And it tells you about the 14ers here in Colorado. Now, you may have seen on one of our other videos that we actually went to the top of Pikes Peak, and despite the fact that Pikes Peak is so tall, it's actually ranked 30th in the state of Colorado. Can you believe it? It's not even the tallest. So really cool, and you can find out more about that and how kind of Colorado measures up to other places, not only here in the States but abroad as well. Did you know that there was actually a dinosaur discovered in Colorado Springs? In fact, this dinosaur right back here, that's the one. It's pretty cool because it has the story of discovering the dinosaur right here in the visitor center. So, just kind of look at this guy. It says here in 1878 that James Hutchison Kerr, a geology professor at Colorado College, actually found this skull, this one right here, in the Garden of the Gods. Over a century later, they discovered that he found something that had not been found anywhere else. So this is one of a kind. So is that why they call it Garden of the Gods? No. We're getting to that part. Now it's time for us to move into one of the larger galleries about all of the flora, fauna, and all of the different kinds of cool stuff you can find in this area. Can you tell how old this tree is? Well, this is all about counting the rings. And if you look at this, these have the smallest, most compact, tiny rings. Wow. Can you identify these little critters? How many of them do you recognize? Now, these are all critters that actually could be found in this area. So, knowing what their tracks look like could be helpful. But this exhibit is great because it shows you what the footprints look like, but if you don't happen to see the footprints, it also shows you what their poo looks like. Yeah, kind of a gross topic, but this helps you to be able to know what's in the area. So, this whole exhibit right here, the poo. For example, would you know what this is? It's pretty large and in charge, which means that it is probably a black bear. Yep. Now let's try a few of these that are smaller. What about this one? What would you think this is? A bat. Okay. In fact, by looking at the scat right here, you can actually see what kind of animals are here, but also what they eat. So this is a great display right here at the Garden of the Gods for learning a little bit more about all of the furry critters. So why is it called Garden of the Gods? Well, we still haven't been outside for you to see the amazingness, but long before it was actually formally known as the Garden of the Gods, it was actually Indian stomping grounds. In fact, the Native American people used to come through here and use the stones that we see today as hearths. That's kind of cool. And there's some other really neat things that you can find in the Native American exhibit here that tell about the hunting and gathering that they used to do across the plains before more exploration happened and Colorado Springs proper was here. And you can find out all the different things that they used to find and use from the nature around them, like these critters right here that we just learned about. Now this section right here tells you about how early explorers came after the Native Americans and what drew them to this area initially. Did you know that you can come here now and actually see all of the people who are considered to be champions of the Garden of the Gods area? This is pretty cool because these are all people who are modern day explorers who have put in work to make this accessible to us. It says here that tourism has always been a popular thing at Garden of the Gods. In fact, since the first settlers came west, Garden of the Gods has been an iconic place to stop and see. The stunning beauty that has been exhibited here is different than the other areas around, and so it really drew people to the area. But, in fact, there is more to this story. The Colorado Springs area actually started to draw in more than just Western settlers. They actually started to draw in people who thought that this area, because of the altitude and all of the things around, had healing properties. So it became a haven for people coming here to escape from tuberculosis, to heal themselves in the natural spaces. And Garden of the Gods actually was a place that a lot of people would come and peacefully walk around as a result of that prescription of free air. In fact, wards like this one popped up all over the Colorado Springs area in the late 1800s, and the reason why people would come here to cure their tuberculosis was because Colorado Springs has an annual 300 days of beautiful sunshine. But that was just the beginning, and by the 1970s, Garden of the Gods was actually listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and in the early 2000s, it was actually honored by TripAdvisor as the best actual park in the United States to visit. So, pretty cool facts, but we still haven't explained the full story. Now, in order for us to fill in some of the blanks of that story, let's go over to the information kiosk. Here we can pick up a map. We can also find out a little bit more about the park itself. And it just happens to be located next to the gift shop, which means that we can also pick up a postcard and maybe a magnet. Okay, coming outside, we actually see this little infographic right here, and whenever we go up, you can actually match up the pieces. So this one right over here is called the North Gateway Rock, and at the top, there's a little hump you can kind of see right here. It's called the Kissing Camels. When we move over, this large part right here is actually the Pikes Peak Highway, which we went on. And then this smaller piece right here is actually called the South Gateway Rock. Now, the tall peak back there is actually Pikes Peak. So there it is right there. And then as you kind of come down from that, right in this area is actually the incline, which if you haven't seen, if you happen to miss that video, go check it out. It's the funniest video I've ever shot because I thought I was going to die. The entire time I'm huffing and puffing, mostly with my tongue out because I felt like I was dying. It was the hardest hike I've ever been on, but I feel so accomplished now, and I can check that one off of my bucket list. Now, rounding out our tour of the different peaks though, right in front of us we have this one that looks a little bit more gray than the others. That one they actually do call the Gray Rock. Now, when you visit Garden of the Gods, there's a lot to explore. They actually have hiking trails in addition to just going and viewing. But also, if you're super adventurous, you can get a permit to climb at Garden of the Gods, which we will not be doing today because that is not our cup of tea. However, it is something that is available. They also have something called the Historic Home Place, and that's kind of a neat thing that you can check out while you're there as well. But I always like to start here at the visitor center. It tells you the story of what's going on, so whenever you get out there you kind of understand more of what you're seeing. Now the cool thing about this that I wanted to fill in for you that we learned inside this very building, the man who actually used to own most of the property for Garden of the Gods actually wanted this to be a free site for everyone, which means that whenever you come here, unless you do one of the extras, absolutely no cost, absolutely free. And because of that, it is a very popular attraction. So as you can see, the entire visitors parking lot just keeps filling in. And then as we kind of move across to where the Garden of the Gods actually is, you'll notice that there is a parking lot that is already pretty full, despite the fact that it's pretty early in the morning. My tip to you guys, come during the slightly less busy season if you can. If you can't, try to come during the week, earlier in the day as opposed to later in the day. Weekends are always packed, so there's just no winning with that one. I sat in line last time on a Saturday for like an hour probably trying to just get to parking, because once you go in, it's harder to get back out. Now it does look like they are mitigating some of that by changing some of the ways that people are parking, but we shall see. Okay, adventurers, we found parking and now we are going to go and explore. Now again, I've been here before, so if you're interested in seeing that first video, go check it out. It's not very great, but we are back to show it in all of its glory today, and it's actually a little bit less crowded today than it was on that day, so this could be very, very good. The first thing that we find is the kissing camels, and you can see them at the very top up there where that little hole is. It actually looks like two camel heads, so that kind of makes more sense now that we can see it a little closer. Now, Garden of the Gods is a great place for you to come out to just have a casual day that's not too intense, but some of the other trails are a little bit more off path and get a little bit more bumpy. But as you can see, the main trail right here, nice and smooth, nice and paved, and nice and wide. So pretty much any accessibility that you have, you can do this one, I promise. Now, there are a few things along the way that you'll find, like this sign right here, that tell you kind of where you are and then where you can look around to find the different things. If you didn't pick up a map in the visitor center, this is a great place to reference. However, if you did, this is going to kind of align with that. And as we came into the parking lot, there's actually something called the Tower of Babel, then the North Gateway Rock, which is where we found the kissing camels. Now we're actually kind of toward the end of this, which is going to be the signature rock, and so we're going to be able to check it out next. Now, as we get closer and closer to the end of the first formation, we start to see it open up, and there's so many more things just waiting to be explored down here. It is absolutely amazing to see how the rocks jut up just out of what would be seemingly the flat area around us, and kind of make this really neat place for us just to kind of find ourselves exploring. Now, as we go through, we see several different signs like this one that tell us a little bit more of the story here. And this was actually considered to be the chuck wagon pavilion. Chuck wagons were the original food trucks, and out here they used to gather up by the thousands. You can see a picture right here illustrating what this would have looked like. They would actually do this during the summer evenings, and they would have food and entertainment right here in the heart of the Garden of the Gods. In fact, this area that we're looking at right here would have been the home of those chuck wagons. And can you imagine thousands of people gathered right in this area, listening to live music, eating whatever wares that they had on the chuck wagon, and having this as the backdrop? That would be amazing. Can you imagine the acoustics out here? Now, I can, for one, just kind of visualize what it would be like to be out here in the midst of all this and how amazing it would be. And that leads me to wonder if that was actually the inspiration behind the Red Rocks Amphitheater. The people who would come here, who would listen to music, and the acoustics would just ring out. I mean, maybe we might have to visit that spot also to go find out some history as to why they selected that area. But today it's about Garden of the Gods, so let's get on. You know how previously we were talking about that Garden of the Gods is free to the public as a result of one man? Well, when you get to the end of Signature Rock, it explains a little bit more of that story. Now, the man in question was Charles Eliot Perkins. After his passing, his children followed his wishes, and in 1909, he fulfilled this by giving Garden of the Gods to Colorado Springs. It was his wish that it forever be kept free to the public. Now, as you can see behind me, this is one of the most popular stops for people to stop and grab their photo because it is one of the only visible markers that is actually on the rocks itself. So this area right here gets a little crowded and crazy, and then all of a sudden it'll just empty out. So if you're wanting to get your picture, just wait a few minutes and then it'll be your turn, like it is mine now. Now, in addition to the plaque that is on the rock up here, there's actually a few areas over here that you can sit down and get out of the heat. So a lot of people come here because there's a little bit of shade, like right over in this area. But there's also some really cool rocks that you can also climb on and take pictures with. So this is a fun area for the entire family, even little Fido who's along for the walk. Now, the real interesting thing to ask yourself while you're going past all these rocks is, would you want to climb them? Because it's kind of interesting to see people just kind of scrambling on them. But when you get onto the rock faces where people are climbing, it is crazy. Last time I was here, there was someone who looked like a tiny little ant at the very, very top. And I just thought, wow, how did you even get up there? And now I see people scrambling on these rocks and I start to think the same thing. I don't think I could ever be a rock climber, guys. I just don't think that's my journey. And speaking of ants, as we are watching people scramble around on rocks like ants, we find this fascinating honey ant story. It actually says here that honey ants are one of the park's most unusual and overlooked species. Now, in the visitor center, we were able to watch a video of the honey ants, but here you can actually see what one looks like magnified to a very crazy scale. Can you imagine this attacking you? Wow. Of course, in all reality, honey ants are only about this big, so we really don't have to worry about them too much. But it's cool to learn about why they're important to the park, what makes them interesting, and what makes all of the park kind of go round. And as we go around, there's more. Guys, we just passed by somebody who was actually about to start climbing. Maybe, just maybe, we'll be in for a treat and we'll be able to spot them on the crag in a minute. This is where they were climbing last time I was here. Now, these guys look like they're going a little further down, so I don't know. We might have to follow them for a minute. Along the way, trying to find out where they were going, I saw this guy. Do you see him way up there at the top? He has a lead rope coming down, but wow, that is up there. Just barely above the trees, we can see another head kind of emerging onto the mountain there. Look, there they go. So as you can see, Garden of the Gods has a little bit of everything, from the mild with the regular walking to the wild, which I would definitely call this wild. But yeah, tons of cool stuff here. And I can see why that the man who wanted this to be available to all of us found the beauty in it. It's amazing. Whenever you come out here, you can't help but smile as you're looking at all of the really cool rocks and playing around with your family, or just being in awe of these guys. At this stop, we get to learn a little bit more about the past of the Garden of the Gods right here, including that archaeologists have actually found evidence that 3,400 years ago that the Ute Native American people might have been calling this place home. It wasn't until the early 1800s that Zebulon Montgomery Pike and 22 men actually came to this area because it was a part of the Louisiana Purchase. And from there, that's whenever tourism really started. The late 1800s, the Homestead Act moved into this area, and private owners of property started to spring up, and that continued to go forward until current day. Now, Pike is also known for the man who Pike's Peak is named after, and we learned a little bit more about him whenever we went up to the top of the mountain. In fact, at one point in time, he said that Pike's Peak was the most uninhabitable place like in the world. He couldn't see how anything could survive there. And I think that that's kind of interesting, because within the same breath he found this area and raved about how amazing it was. So only a short distance up a mountain makes all the difference in the world. I will say this though, it is much more lush and green here at Garden of the Gods, which could be a portion of why its name is reflected. Now, I hope you can see why I wanted to return to Garden of the Gods and share it with you. It is gorgeous. It's pretty much amazing. And even though we're surrounded by the community of Colorado Springs, it's very rare that you hear any kind of like road noise or anything like that. You can come here early in the morning or late in the evening, and it is completely silent. It is amazing. I'm here during midday and it's pretty crowded, and even with the crowds, no big deal. I could still have a quiet reflection moment on one of the many benches which is around here if I wanted to. Or I could just take a peaceful walk and learn a little bit more about the area. Well, adventurers, I hope you have enjoyed coming along with me to Garden of the Gods here in Colorado Springs, an absolutely free site that you can come out and explore, whether you're mild or wild. I have absolutely enjoyed myself getting out here in the sun and taking a little bit of a break from all of the other attractions, and this has been amazing. If you've enjoyed today's video, make sure that you leave a like, hit the subscribe, and check out all of my future content because I'm in Colorado for over a month. That's right, tons of cool Colorado stuff coming your way. Bye guys!